All welcome, Rob. Damn, now there's gonna be Elaine. Hi. Okay, I can't say
It'd be
everybody.
hard to keep up with.
I did three.
Yeah, pretty good.
Ooh, thanks for joining us in the evening.
Welcome in, folks.
While people are trickling in, I love doing the thing where you put in the chat, where are you messaging from? If there's something else about you want us to know, go for it. Okay, Monterey, beautiful, beautiful area. And the other thing too, actually, is whether you came more because you want to know the answer, like what is the structure, for instance, of San Francisco government? Like how do the parts relate to each other? Or are you more interested in the tool? And if it's both, then you know, that's great too. Okay. Hi, Michael.
I wanted to participate.
I guess I should just say I'm in Berkeley. The tool, okay. Our event coordinator, Dyra, right before this was saying, a lot of people don't usually respond or like email the hello at in, reference to our events, but there was definitely a contingent of like, don't you know AI is bad responses.
Cool.
So I'm glad people here you're interested in the tool. I
Yeah.
guess it wouldn't have come if I thought it was bad. Okay, great. Well, I think that we should just go ahead and get started. My name is Sonja Trauss. I'm executive director at Yes in My Backyard, and it's my distinct pleasure, and I'm very excited to invite Michael Adams, who's founder, right, of CivLab.
Yep.
Um, at YIMBY Law, we are associated with YIMBY Action, and YIMBY Action is the political nonprofit. YIMBY Action has 80 chapters in 25 states doing housing project advocacy with political endorsements, community organizing, and YIMBY Law is the C3 side of this, and we facilitate the chapters doing housing project advocacy, which is where the rubber meets the road. And then other kinds of implementation, guidance for governments, um, and policy development. And in California, we sue cities that are out of compliance with state housing law. Um, Potentially, this could grow to Texas. We're doing some enforcement potentially in Illinois. But California is really the capital of us suing cities to enforce state housing law. So if we could actually, Michael, um, just give people a little more background, yeah, about CivLab, how you started it, the basics for what you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, very excited to see all of you here. So my background is in engineering. I worked in the space industry actually out of college for about 5 years, and it was very exciting. Uh, Space is very cool, but Earth is better than space, and Earth seemed to be having a lot of problems. And so uh, I felt very strongly that I should be doing something about this. Um, I had no idea what that meant. Um, but especially during COVID, and I was in San Francisco walking down the street, I just I absolutely felt that we must be capable of better than this. And so I left my job in the space industry to figure out how to be useful to civilization, which is a pretty broad prompt, and it definitely took a while to converge on the answer. But for me, it was local government, and so I spent a lot of time uh, digging into exactly what it was that felt wrong about what was going on in our cities, and what does a better, more positive vision of our cities look like. And so um, naturally, this sort of leads to the question of, well, okay, like how are cities governed? Um, and when I started to really dig into that question, this is where like a series of revelations happened, where essentially I realized like, okay, I'm an engineer. I'm used to thinking in this sort of like systems way about problems and solutions. I did not have that skill set for government at all. And so, despite having all these opinions about what was good and what was bad, I had no sort of like technical ability to evaluate what was happening and why and what specifically we should do to change it. And so, this really led me to uh, basically I quit my job and read the San Francisco charter for like 3 months, just sort of mapping out everything I could find in the government. And we're going to talk a little bit about that journey here today. Um, but you know, the simple motivation for the work at CivLab is like good government requires good citizenship. And so, um, if we want to have good government in the long run that is capable of solving all sorts of problems, we really need a pool of talent. We need the average citizen to be able to plug in whatever way makes sense and contribute to the governing process. And so you'll see a lot of this ethos kind of come through in the presentation I have for us today. So uh, I think it probably makes sense to roll into that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go for it. I do want to just ask, so with CivLab, can people like join it? How do people get involved with it?
Yes. So there are several answers to that question, but I will say in general, so CivLab is the organization I started. It's short for Civilization Lab. And the whole idea is how do we cook up a flourishing civilization? Um, the way most people so far have been able to contribute is with I teach a civics class, how SF Gov works. It's a 7 week civics class. We cover all of the fundamentals, a systems level view of the city government. We read the law and understand how the law works. We look at specific like topics of interest, and we do kind of deep dives on the structural things around that, and including land use and housing. We talk about police policy. We get into case law a little bit and what happens when you sue the city. Um, and so there's a lot of good stuff in there. We take some field trips to City Hall to see government in action. So it's a good time. And that has been kind of the primary way that people engage with CivLab so far through the class. Um, I also write, and a surprising and delightful amount of very interesting discussion and interaction has come that way. Um, I also am building tools that are for the public, and we're going to be talking a lot more about that today. So
Okay, great. Sounds good. Okay, let's roll. Let's roll into it. And
let's
also,
do
while you
it.
bring that up, for people who are in the New York area, there's one other thing that I've heard of that's similar. It's called Maximum New York. Other than that,
Yes.
I don't know if there's anything like this. We have it in San Francisco and New York. And if you're in another place and you want to start one, then circle up.
Yeah. Strongly endorse Maximum New York. Daniel Gollier is a good friend. He does excellent work. And so if you are in New York and you want to understand how your government works, definitely check that out. Okay. Can we see the slideshow here? Are we ready to roll?
I can see it.
Cool. Okay. So we're going to talk about using AI to understand government. Um, the general premise that I'm going to be talking about today is that it is my strong belief that in the next decade, our relationship to government will change. I understand in this moment if that feels sort of ominous. Many people right now are neutral or pessimistic, and I get it. But it is my strong belief specifically that our relationship to government will change for the better. And I believe, and I'm already seeing that AI has a pivotal role to play in making this a possibility. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. It's the bulk of the things that we're going to talk about today. But first, I want to go over like why does any of this matter? And the reason we want to improve our relationship to government, we want to understand it, and we want to be able to engage with it in a better way is because we want to fix our government. And so first I want to talk a little bit about how do you actually fix your government? And well, the thing is, before you can answer that question, we need to be a little bit specific about what do you actually want government to do? Here are some popular options. And of course, here, at in YIMBY land, building housing is probably the top response. But there are many popular answers, right? Ending homelessness, improving public transit. And the thing is, these are not new topic areas. So this is a section, the first picture here is a screenshot from the San Francisco Administrative Codes, part of our law. And the sentence I have highlighted here is that the problem of rent increases reached crisis level in the spring of 1979. So housing prices, this is not a new issue. And if we look down the picture at the bottom, that is then Mayor Dianne Feinstein walking through a shanty town, which apparently is what they called homeless encampments in the 1980s. I don't know why it was black and white. They surely had color cameras by then. I think they're just being dramatic. But the point is that this is also not a new issue. And on the topic of public transit, here's a proposed BART map from 1950. If you've ridden BART, you know that this is not at all what the actual BART map looks like. Uh, Many of these segments were never built. And so as we talk about what we want, our public transportation to look like in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, these are not new problems. They're, for the most part, decades old, 50 years or more. And this is kind of my point, which is that sort of no matter what you want government to do, uh, it can't do it. And so there's this general point, which is government actually can't really solve hard problems. Housing is a big one, of course, but to me, it feels like a more general problem. And housing is one of the most sort of like visible and painful kind of symptoms of that. Okay, so what do you want government to do? We have some examples. We know that government can't solve hard problems, but why is that? For me, the answer is governing is more than government. And so you can't tell the story of what government is and what it does and what you'd like it to do different when you think of government in this way. And this is how we're used to thinking of it. So we're here and government is sort of out there, right? It's this distant, shadowy machine dedicated to making the world bad. Um, we're all familiar, at least roughly, with the three levels of government. And I would say this is incomplete. And thinking of government in this way actually holds us back. Um, I think any productive solution needs to start with the foundation, which is the people. And you can see here that the people are happy because, as it turns out, they're quite powerful, and there's a lot of civic agency available to us all. So the people really are the foundation here. But often our model of government is something like this, where here's the people, we're separate from government. It's distant and it's kind of opaque to us. And so every couple of years we'll show up, we'll vote, and the plan is that the good guys win and the bad guys lose. And then something will happen, and then good things. The government does what I want. It builds housing, it ends homelessness, it improves public transit. Um, my argument is that this is an incomplete model of how governing actually happens. And so when we think of citizenship and we think of government as just like the thing that we vote for every now and then, we're really selling ourselves short and we're leaving a lot of our agency on the table, and we're going to have a harder time explaining what actually happens and why that is. Um, I think of it more like this. So we have the civic industrial base, and it's a unified kind of ecosystem from top to bottom. And I'll add in the last sort of layer here. And so my proposal for what governing actually looks like is it looks like this entire civic industrial base. So you have the people at the foundation, you have this social layer, which is maybe not explicitly about politics or government, but it's where people come together, they coordinate, they talk about things that they care about, they hang out and they have fun. I picked some examples that are relevant to San Francisco, but the same thing applies everywhere. So neighborhood associations, of course. The Commons is a social space where people hang out. In San Francisco, we started organizing a lot of trash pickups, which is an awesome way just to get out and meet your neighbors and make the whole place, look and feel better. And then this political and policy layer, I think that these are groups, and YIMBY fits perfectly here, which are outside of government, they are key to telling the story of what actually happens, how government actually unfolds. And so these are maybe advocacy groups, maybe like policy, like think tank type groups that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting often to help the government do whatever it is that it wants to do.
I
And
have a
so, yeah,
sorry, service of questions in the chat. Right. I think this is interesting.
yes,
People are asking whether you think unions are in the political and policy category or in the social category.
that's a great question, actually. And thank you for speaking on behalf of the chat. Feel free to do that at any time. I think, to be fair, you could actually sort of put them in the middle because they have elements of both. Um, Certainly, they provide like a rich sort of communal, like coordination space for the people in that union. They often, assuming they're organized well, they flex their political muscle as well. And so I think for sure you could say that they sort of straddle those two lines. I think these are useful distinctions, and many fit like pretty cleanly into one or the other. But you can definitely blur the lines a little bit for sure. Um, and so, for those of you on the call, if you've spent time in this world, um, this might be a sort of a new way of thinking about it, but if you've been around, uh, if you've been in the world of like YIMBY action and all of the housing advocacy that's been going on, you were sort of already implicitly doing this. And I think to YIMBY's credit, they've really done a great job of doing the hard work at basically every level, which is a lot of like nuts and bolts mechanical stuff about uh, very sophisticated changes to the law to sort of unblock housing in different ways, but also then like the community building. I mean, even events like this. And so most people do not think of it in this way, but I would say to YIMBY's great credit, I think they're one of the best examples of this sort of like full stack approach to making things happen ultimately in government. Um, Before we leave this, I'm just going to stop for a quick aside here. Where are the goats? Um, it is often the case that when we're thinking about politics, we think a lot about the president. Um, And when we're thinking about presidential elections, to borrow a sports analogy, it does not often feel like we're running Steph Curry versus LeBron James, to use a basketball metaphor, to stay with government. It doesn't really often feel like we have George Washington versus Abe Lincoln. Um, it seems like the overall quality of the people that we end up having to vote for doesn't always make us feel good. And so the last point I wanted to make here is like, how do you get these all-star people who, the true greats, they write their name into the history books? I think you can only really understand it if you build from the bottom, right? So how do you end up with a Steph Curry if you're in the Bay Area, or a LeBron James in other parts of the country? I think it really does build from the bottom. This is the crucial point. Um, you don't get Steph Curry or LeBron James because you really want a good basketball player, and every couple of years, like you make a big fuss about it. You get the best basketball players because millions of kids grow up playing basketball. The best among them get selected to prestigious high school teams, and then to the best colleges, and then to the NBA. And then from there, the greats, will create history. And I think the same is absolutely true of civics, of government. If we want to feel great about the next presidential election and the candidates that we're running there, I think ultimately that builds from the bottom. And if we don't have a very strong sort of civic industrial base, producing excellent talent at the local levels, kind of building up through the state, we're going to keep being disappointed. And this is a very real pathway, right? So, kind of regardless of where you're tracking from, you've probably heard the name Gavin Newsom as a likely presidential candidate, and it seems quite likely that he will run. Gavin Newsom started out as a district supervisor in San Francisco, and then he became the mayor, and then he became the governor, and of course now he's very likely to run for president. So this is a real thing. Like, this is how American government builds from the bottom. So I wanted to do all that sort of context setting because it motivates the work that I'm doing at CivLab. And so,
Sorry, can I just point out too while we're here,
yeah,
a this guys, you're in the room for some practicing practicing practitioners discovering social science. Um, one of the ways I discovered Michael was I was reading his blog, and he wrote something that I also think is true. That is, we're only just beginning to see social scientists take note of it. As you know, of course, we're in an extremely polarized moment. And my theory, and Michael's theory also, was that this social line where you spend time with people that are near you just because you're near each other is like really decaying, because since smartphones and cheap airfare, like, yeah, 15, 20, or 30 years ago, you might have known all your neighbors because like there was nothing else for you to do. But now you don't have to meet your neighbors just to socialize, right? You can also like easily fly to like go see your family or go see your college friends or whatever. And and people are investing so much more in these other relationships. So this like very important like local social thing is really decaying, and it is causing problems just like all the way up.
Yep.
Hmm.
Yep. I'm with you, of course. Um, and so I also think, this has been a helpful way for me to think about solving that problem because it's very hard to say like, okay, I want to get out there and sort of plug into the civic ecosystem. If my first thought is like, okay, do I have to like run for office? Like, what's the deal here? It feels like a very high barrier to entry. And I think one of the very happy stories about this way of thinking about things is that there's actually things very near to you. It's like a very like nice first step. And actually, I'm trying to make that easier and easier for people to get into. And so that's kind of where we're going here, right? So if we have this model of the civic industrial base, the civic ecosystem in mind, um, we know that there's a role for the people to play. Obviously, voting matters, but there are many things that are happening all the time, not long before and long after election day. So, like, how do we kind of get our bearing? How do we sort of plug into government? Well, when I started trying to answer this question, what you're seeing on your screen was the state of the art. So, this was in 2023, halfway through 2023, and the city of San Francisco had no public org chart. I was able to fish this one page org chart from 2010 out of the Internet Archives. So this was a dead link I was able to find and then retrieve the image that used to live at that link. And it was a picture from 2010. And so it was very incomplete when it was made. And by the time I found it 13 years later, it was just out of date. And so this is this is not going to cut it, right? If we want to understand that ecosystem and figure out where we plug into everything, what opportunities are available to us, just understand what is happening. We need much better than this. And so this is what I have set out to build. Um, this is the kind of tool that I think we need. So this is a screenshot from the San Francisco government graph. So as I was talking about a little bit in the intro, um, I wanted to figure out how San Francisco government worked. I left my job to basically study the charter and take note on every entity that I found. I couldn't get an org chart, so I wanted to just build one for myself. And so that's what I set out to do. It took me several months to like read through everything and take notes, and build this sort of internal database for myself just to understand the government. Um, and as it turned out, a lot of people wanted to see this database. So I've spent a lot of time um, trying to build this database into something that's easy to see, like the system at a glance, like this kind of data visualization for what the government actually looks like. And so we recently launched the SF Gov Graph. And so what we have here, and we'll take a live look at it in a second, but it is the first complete data model of every entity in the San Francisco government. Every node that you see here represents some part of government. We'll take a close look here in just a moment. But we have every node, we have every relationship between those nodes, and we have a lot of other things too. So we have the government entities and relationships, like I've talked about. We also have every elected official. We have commissioners and department heads. We have the budget for the city. We have breakdown by um, uh, spending by departments. We have contract information. We're now starting to track public meetings, and we read every news article that comes in, and we identify if it's talking about any particular part of government, and then we tag it to that part of government. And so I want to uh, pause here to show you a live look at what this is like, and this is available online. So you know you can all play around with it, uh, and I will preempt questions that might be coming in already, but I'll just send the link. Um,
So far, we have people just being very excited, and we have one comment that hairball networks of local government is absolute catnip for me.
all right. Well, you came to the right place then, huh? Cool. So let's go to the live view of the San Francisco government graph. So because we're here at YIMBY, let's take a look at the planning apparatus. So we'll look at the Planning Commission. So we have the Planning Commission here. We have all of the commissioners who sit on that commission. We have upcoming public meetings, and we have, like I was talking about, news articles. So we scrape every news article, we identify what's being talked about, and then we tag it to the relevant entity. And so we can also see here the different relationships. So we can see in the case of the Planning Commission, there are 7 commissioners. We can see who appoints them. We can see that the Planning Commission oversees the planning department. Um, and we see a lot of, in San Francisco, as many of you will know, our land use is a very sophisticated and complex apparatus, and you can see that reflected in the Gov Graph here. So we have historic preservation, and we have the Board of Appeals and many other advisory entities. Um, so this is the overall structure here. We have the outer ring is departments, just to be clear. The middle ring is commissions. I know a lot of you are coming in from outside of San Francisco. Your governments may or may not have something like this, but commissions, just for context, are um, they are very often groups of appointed citizens. So they're not governmental employees, and they have oversight authority over the department. So in San Francisco, the Planning Commission oversees the planning department, and they have like very significant authority, as in they can decide whether to approve or disapprove many housing projects. So in San Francisco, at least, you really can't tell the story of local land use decisions without both the planning commission and the planning department. Um, no matter what city you're in, if it's not San Francisco, you would have fewer nodes at the commission and advisory level. San Francisco is a bit of an outlier in how many of these we have. Um, we do count them all up, so it's easier to keep track. We have 54 commissions, depending on how you count, um, and we have many, many more advisory entities as well. And so they're all listed out here. And because we're here to talk about a lot of stuff in the context of housing, one of the things that we're doing to make this to kind of like we've been talking about, to lower the barrier to entry, to help people plug in, is identifying who is relevant to a particular topic. So in the case of housing, suppose that you don't know much about how the San Francisco government works, but you do know that you care about housing. Like this was the kind of question I had when I was first starting, and it wasn't clear to me like who matters here, like what is this part of the world look like? And so we've tried to help solve that here by identifying those key nodes, right? So we have the board, which is our legislative body, the mayor, planning commission, the office of the mayor, planning department, board of appeals, all of these folks relevant to housing. And some of you might also find this interesting, but not only do we have the structural stuff, but we break it out into budget information as well. So for every department, you can see how much the overall budget is and how much the breakdown is for any given department. And within that, We have breakdowns for uh, different types of spending, total active contracts, nonprofit spending, and then here we have um, even more granularity about the total count of spending going on. So um, we've really tried to pick out a lot of the most relevant information and sort of unify it all in one place because there is a ton of awesome public data out there. And we've gone from a problem where the biggest limitation was government is not transparent. We just don't really understand what it's doing. And if like unless a journalist gets in there and figures it out for us, it's just going to be hard to tell. We've actually sort of slipped into this new paradigm where there's actually so much data available that it is still kind of inaccessible and opaque, but not because it's not there. It's because there's so much that it's actually hard to make sense of. And I think this is this is where the magic of AI will make all the difference. Um, I think we can poke around with this a little bit later, but I just want to bring us back um, to the slides here to finish. But this is where AI makes all of the difference. So, um, where do we go with this? Well, because we have AI on our team, uh, we're going to be able to turn the Gov Graph into your personal civic assistant. We're doing this first in San Francisco, and so you can see in the Gov Graph already some of the building blocks for this. But what I want is to give every person starting in San Francisco like the ideal civic research assistant. So you should be able to uh, describe what you're interested in. And maybe that's housing. Maybe it's specifically Mayor Lurie's family zoning plan, right? So there's a big rezoning effort underway in San Francisco. How would you find out what's going on with that right now? Well, if you're in a cool Slack group, you could probably ask the experts there. Um, but generally speaking, unless you have built up this sort of social network of people who are following this stuff all the time, then like in that case, hopefully the people in that group, and I know that YIMBY happens to almost always have the answers for housing related stuff. Um, but we should be able to do that for every topic, and it should be in real time. And so I think we have moved into this paradigm, like I was saying, where we now have all of this data available. And with the rise of AI, now that data won't just sit out there on the internet waiting for somebody to look at it. So with our data, we can read every law. Our AI agents can watch every meeting. And the cool thing about AI is it never gets tired of watching meetings and reading news articles and studying budget data. And so I'm very excited because for the first time, this has become feasible. Uh, we would never have been able to build the GovGraph as it exists now, and we certainly would not have been able to build what I think it's capable of without AI because it's simply too much work to do manually. And so we're in the process right now of taking the GovGraph, the data infrastructure that we've built, and making it much more responsive, letting you set alerts for things that you care about so you can be notified when a land use and transportation meeting is coming up relevant to a topic that you care about. Um, you can search for the names of things. You can get the latest on the rezoning plan sort of given to you as one continuous thread. Who's relevant, who's been involved, what's going to happen next. All of this should be made available. And, in the YIMBY context, it's probably going to be housing related. But if you think back to the start of the presentation, we were talking about homelessness, transportation, all of these things. It could be the park at the end of your street. If the government is talking about it, you should know. You should know beforehand. You should know when to show up. You should know who the relevant people are. And this is now possible. I'm very excited about this. So we're building this out in San Francisco, but the real goal is to bring this to every city. And so when I said in the next decade, our relationship to government will change for the better, this is what I had in mind. With the rise of AI, with the rise of people who care enough to take the time to plug into their city in whatever way, feels most resonant to them, I think our cities are going to come to feel much less confusing. will get much more used to engaging with the civic ecosystem in many different ways, kind of continuously, more as a ritual. And I think that, you know, mapping this into the context of the civic ecosystem, this is what's going to drive change across many topic areas over time. And I think YIMBY is an excellent example of that. And I think uh, we will have more YIMBYs across more areas if we can lower the barrier to entry. And I think now that we can, I'm very excited to do that. So for us, for CivLab, what's next is we're fundraising. If you want to fund this, we have a lot of interest for fundraising, which is a good sign. I think it means we're onto something. You're free to reach out about that. But what I really want is I need people to help me build this. I think um, I think the future of local government is at stake. I think the future of American government is at stake, and AI is coming, whether we want it to or not. It's a powerful tool. Tools can be used for great good, and that's exactly what I intend to do. So reach out. You can find me. You can email me, michael@civlab.org. You can go to civlab.org. You can find the links to the Gov Graph. You can find the links to the civics class I teach, to the writing. Um, and I'm most active on Twitter. You can find me there. Uh, I want people to come along for the ride. I'm very excited to build this. I need help building it, and it's more fun to build it with friends. So if any of this is interesting to you, please reach out. Um, that's how to understand government using AI.
Amazing. So thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, there's some really good quotes in the chat I'm saving, like as if you might need pull quotes for a book.
Oh,
Those,
cool.
but people are really loving it. Okay, so there's sort of two big categories of question that I think people want you to talk about more, which is more info on the AI aspect, right? Like how
Yep.
exactly do you build it? How do you, I mean, we've all interacted with AI enough to know that sometimes the AI is just totally wrong. Yeah,
Yep.
tell us more about that.
Yeah. So AI is great. It is not perfect. And so you need to be very intentional with how you use it. And so um, I think for us, our approach has been um, if you think about generating this data infrastructure, we have as you can, especially if you're a CS person, you can kind of read between the lines and see the kind of data infrastructure that we have to support the Gov Graph. Um, but I think that it's all about slotting AI into the right place. And so a good example of this is, like I said, I spent months and months, and now it's been, uh, we're actually past 2 years now of like full-time effort studying the government. I've been very fortunate to find people along the way who wanted to help me with this. And so, um, like human understanding of governmental mechanics absolutely cannot be replaced by AI. And you can try this. I know that like there's very specific questions I can ask AI that are my like test questions to see how good the models are getting. And the thing is that AI models are basically only as good as what's written on the internet. And you could read the entire charter and still not actually understand everything about how the government works and how it's structured. How do I know this? Because I did it. And so if that is like the input data that the LLMs are getting, then you know just inherently they'll have limitations. And so what we do is we build out the data model like humans, and we identify like what actually exists. Okay, so in San Francisco, we have our elected officials, we have commissions, we have advisory entities, we have departments, and we pull from the law to like directly from the law to help us build out that data model. And so that's something where it comes straight from the law. So if the law says the planning commission has 7 commissioners, that just is what it is. Like there's not much room to like hallucinate there and get that wrong. Where AI is super helpful is okay, you know, at a weekly cadence, go and search the internet for the department head of the planning department and get the latest person. Because, and this happened a couple months ago, we had a change of who that department head was. So by constraining, like one way we negotiate this is we constrain where we put AI. And so right now we'll like look, find the latest person. And so we do some checks on the back end, but I also think that um, it's it's less likely to go wrong. It's a skill that AI is very good at looking up a question on the internet. So using it in that sense for data that is easily publicly available, that's a good fit. For building out important structural information, I don't think it's currently a good fit for that. So we try to be very thoughtful about it. And then um, we have some ways to detect errors. So if suppose that we looked up on the internet who the latest department head is, and we found a name, and maybe it was the previous department head, but we also look at public meetings, and we see at the latest planning commission meeting, the department head was present, and they were giving it an update, a director's report on what the planning department was doing, and those two names don't match up. Then that's easy for us to flag and say something is wrong here, like this needs to be reviewed. So I think my sort of this is a long answer, but the two main parts are being thoughtful about where you use it and where you don't. And the second part of that is because we have multiple data sources, when we synthesize them, it's very easy for us. No, it's actually extremely hard, but it's very possible for us to find out if there's an anomaly in the data, which sort of prompts us to review and make sure that everything is right.
Okay, so this goes to kind of answering more than one question. We have people asking, like, how can people who aren't coders help? And also, how do we get this in how can I get this in my city? So, if can you go through like specifically, like if you had volunteer in Denver, Colorado, or in Berkeley, California,
Mhm.
what's something that they could do using their extremely valuable human brain? Um, to start to get this going.
Yeah. So, I mean, fortunately for all of us, there is an infinite amount of civic excellence available. And so there is no shortage of things to do. I think there's a couple different things. One is that in order to expand the Gov Graph to other cities, we will need all of the sort of data inputs brought together. So if you're interested in bringing the Gov Graph to your city, this is something we're already starting to think about, though we're focused mostly on San Francisco right now, and we're sort of gearing up for New York next. But like I said, the goal is all cities, and we're trying to get there as fast as possible. So if you are whatever city you're in, if you want the Gov Graph in your city, then you can reach out uh, and I'll help you. I'll sort of point you in the right direction for what kinds of data we would need to sort of build out the data model for your city. Um, and I will just say, like, regardless of the Gov Graph specifically, taking time to kind of map out the data available to you in your jurisdiction is a really great practice. And I learned an incredible amount about San Francisco in the process of doing that. So, highly recommend. Um, but
Can I just, when you say map out the data available to you,
Mhm.
can just be really, that probably what that is very obvious to you, right? But does
Yep,
that mean, for instance, it's like I live in Berkeley, I could go. So mapping out would be like, well, one, we have a rent board. And
yep.
so that would be like the first one on my map, right? And then the rent board, I kind of forget what they offer. They offer a lot. They tell you what the current rents are. They have like a list of available, or not available, existing rent controlled units, the address, what the rents are, right? All of that would go in my document, right? If I was like making a map of the data that's available, or is it something else?
No, that's exactly right. And so it can take many forms. And the reason uh, I was not extremely specific is because there are many right answers to what mapping it out looks like. What you described, I think, yes, absolutely. So, um, what mapping it out can mean is you're already familiar with something, and maybe it's like the rent board in your city, right? So that's like the first node, but like be concrete about that. Like where does that come from in the law, right? So if you can find the legal source, then you can start to uh like if you can make your way through the law, then you can identify, oh, there's the rent board, and here's this other entity, and you can sort of start to piece together, in this case, like maybe more of like a housing specific thing. Um, I always advocate for people to get familiar reading the law. A lot of housing law is like very, very sophisticated, but a lot of the law that sort of sets the overall structure of the government is surprisingly like readable, and with something like ChatGPT as your pal, you can paste in a huge section of the law and ask it to help you read through it, and it can save you a lot of time. And when you give it the law directly, it's usually pretty good at answering questions like what entities are in here that are relevant to housing. So something like that could be easy. Um, you don't have to go straight to the law. That can be kind of a daunting task for many people, but you can just search like, okay, the rent board, like who else matters here? And you can just start to build out a list of relevant things. And so uh, if we're specifically trying to build like the Gov Graph related stuff, like the structural things, then doing that sort of research is great. But it could also be like, yeah, where does my city publish its spending data? Is there a dashboard on permit approval times? Like all of these sorts of data sources. In many cities, especially all of the large ones, there's a lot of rich information available. And it's just sitting there and so few people look at it. So if you take the time to do it, you will quickly find yourself like advancing up the levels of like expertise in whatever topic it is that you find interesting. And frankly, like a thorough Substack post about some dashboard that you found and you look through and you can see like the implications of like, wow, permit times in my city are X number of days, and here's how many new buildings we've built in the last year. Um, People love that stuff. It's just in most cases they're not going to take the time to go and look for it. And so if you can, out of curiosity, out of interest, go and find that data and make it pretty, make it easy to understand for people, um, that's a huge benefit. And that's the kind of thing I've been doing in San Francisco. And I think you know that's like the first step to the magic. I think that's where it starts.
Okay, good. Yeah. So what we're talking about basically, the work product is a doc that's like a list of links and hopefully a little bit of explanation about what you find at the links. And if you get real passionate and you're like, oh, I found a data source, go ahead and dive into that data source and write up
Yep,
what you found. I saw something, a person was talking about why do they write on Substack, and they use this phrase that writing like increases their surface area.
sure does. Yep.
I just thought that was a really, I liked that metaphor a lot, that it allows you to be in contact with so many more people potentially. Second thing about being in contact with people, if it sounds boring to just, and you want to not be on screens, you can also learn a lot from practitioners. I mean,
For
that's
sure.
honestly, I was more oriented that way. Like that when I found somebody who was a commissioner on on a planning commission or a bureaucrat, I just asked them so many questions. How did you get appointed? Who's in charge of this? Who's in charge of that? And people will tell you because they love that you care about their boring
Mhm.
job. And so that can be a more fun way.
That's
Um,
true. And I advocate a mix of both because one without the other will definitely feel incomplete. And I can't imagine that reading the law for hours and hours at a time wouldn't feel exciting. But if it doesn't, then for sure, go and talk to the real humans who are doing the governing. That's always a good move.
it's also, you might find there are things that are true that are not written down.
Absolutely. Yep.
Um,
Yep.
so the other question we have here, so we've about 10 more minutes, so get them
Yep.
in. Is people want to know about the money, right? How are you
Mhm.
monetizing CivLab? Like, what's your business model going to be? And I have one person I think had a suggestion or a question, which is like, are you going to be able to get money from cities, right? Like, this seems like something they should pay for, frankly.
Yeah. I would agree with you. I would also, I think that cities are doing their best, and in many cases, it's not very good. And while I would love for them to fund this, they should be, they ideally they would build it in the first place. Um, I think practically speaking, cities, the way I have come to think about it is it's city's job to make the data available. It's citizens' job to make it beautiful. And so um, I I am holding the door open for public funding at some point, but I'm not going to wait for it, and I need to move faster than that. And so so far we've gotten to where we are now with donations from basically friends and believers in the work. So it's I've been I I worked as an engineer for about 5 years, spent basically all of my savings, raised some grant money to uh, get enough help and keep myself alive long enough to actually build this. Um, but I think I am now fundraising as a company because to move at this scale and speed that I want to move at, um, I think there's a world in which the data that we have provided here uh, is also useful to the people who govern like as their jobs. And so um, one, the business model is essentially get this tool out to every person for free. One, because I believe that's why I got into this in the first place. And two, because I think that if you can get people to spend attention on civic topics of interest, you unlock a lot of good stuff. And so then if you think back to the civic ecosystem, for the people, I've built this for free. It will always be free so long as I have anything to say about it. On top of that, like the politics and policy layer, I think I can build tools for them that they would pay for. And the idea is just that using the same data, I can build tools that people who do this professionally will pay for, and that will fund the sort of like public goods educational resources um, in every city in the US that is automatically up to date with the magic of AI and very smart and caring humans who spend their time and effort to make sure it stays that way. So that's the money answer is so far it's been a nonprofit. Going forward, we're going to see if this can be a company because I really cannot wait to get this in every city and getting grants to fund that in every city is a very slow and difficult process.
Okay,
So
so
we,
technical question though. You have a
yep,
C3 and do you also
fiscally sponsored nonprofit.
okay.
So it's not a standalone nonprofit, but it is charitable use restricted funds. Um, so it's like it is a nonprofit without having to file for your own 501(c)(3), because that is a lot of work, and I couldn't afford that. Uh, the legal fees, the timing, all of that stuff. Um, so yeah, so it has all been charitable, pretty much so far. Um, so that's what the money looks like. And of course, now I have to prove that all of this is true.
Hmm.
Um, but early signs are very encouraging and exciting.
What about it seems like a sector, if it's still a sector, that would be interested in this is the press, right? Local press, like they sh this the void this fills, right, is the void that they have kind of stepped away from.
Yes, absolutely. And I have gotten strong interest from uh, local news operations who want to kind of refresh their coverage with tools like this. And so nothing public yet, but there will be some announcements in that direction in the near future. But yes, we're going to bring the Gov Graph um, and the suite of tools we're building to local news politics coverage. That's exactly what it's for.
Yeah, this is another thing that social scientists are pointing to as something that's just like ruining our political process is that in the past, when newsrooms had money from classifieds, they spent that money on covering local politics. And so people, it wasn't the most popular section, but people like had heard the names. They kind of
Yep,
knew who their local electeds were because there were articles about what was going on. And, that's the first thing to cut because it's at that nexus of like expensive and labor intensive, but not like restaurant reviews, or I don't know,
yep.
concert or something. So if this could make doing good local coverage less expensive, for instance, this could be a really important game changer.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways it can go. I think for now, I am most focused on building all of the tools that I can tell will be helpful. And then kind of the next step is like getting them in people's hands and sort of iterating on that based on what we learn. I think yes, absolutely. Um, if you can, and this is one of the reasons the reaction from the media players has been so strong. You have a limited number of reporters, and of course they want to stay on top of everything, but they can't sit in every public meeting, right? And so um, we've existed in this gap where I've already been talking about this a little bit, but like government used to be actually quite opaque. We just didn't have that much data. Then we had an incredible amount of data, but it was like so much that it was actually hard, very difficult to keep up with everything. And now moving into the AI era, all of a sudden, well, yes, we have all of this data, but now we also have something that can read all of this data and help us make sense of it. So it's very exciting, and there's a real moment here where, um, like the opportunity has arisen, and the answer is not yet clear. I think I know what this looks like, and I think there's a very good outcome for all of us if we build it in this way. Um, but that's not a given. Like it needs to be pulled from the future into reality, and it is quite a task.
Well, thank you so much for coming, for telling us about this. Yes, help us pull this from the future into the reality. This is um, make this idea uh, into something that's present. I guess one last thing I can't resist with Brian Swanson in here saying, "What are you doing to reduce the barrier to enter into awareness?" And I have to make a plug that the whole premise of this particular presentation is that if you want to make change, you might want to know something about the system you're trying to make change. That is true. It's really great. And if you can't be bothered and you just have an opinion and want to go to a public meeting and tell your opinion, put yourself on a soapbox, you know what? Don't let anybody stop you. Um, Many people are nervous about talking loudly about something they don't know anything about, but you might you might still have truth in you, and that's what politics is also all about. And like at YIMBY Action, we love to give people permission to like bring their truth to a public meeting. The worst that'll happen is you'll find out you're wrong, but that's actually fine. You get smarter that way.
Still a
So
step in the right direction.
it's still a step. Exactly. You got out of the house. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. Have a really, really great night. Sign up, stay involved, join, sign up for Michael's class, and see you soon.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for having me.